Hi, and thank you for joining us. My name is Tiana, and I am the Community Manager for Beyond Type 1. Welcome to Knowledge Drop, an interview series where we speak with various experts about different topics surrounding Type 1 diabetes. Knowledge Drop is made possible with support from Dexcom. I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Kittie Wyne, an endocrinologist from Ohio State University. In today's series, we are going to talk about transitioning to college when you are living with type 1 diabetes. Kittie, would you like to share a little bit about yourself before we jump into the questions?
I'm an adult endocrinologist here at the Ohio State University. You got to get the part. It's very important to them here. And so what I do primarily here is see people with type 1 diabetes. One of my priorities is the students with type 1 to make sure they have access to care. And so that's very important to me and why I'm happy to be here for this. My training was actually done in Chicago and in Texas. And originally I'd come into endocrinology with an interest in lipids. And of course, that led me to diabetes and led me on to type 1 diabetes. And what I discovered along the way is there's not a lot of clinics who are dedicated to adults with type 1 diabetes. You see it in pediatrics, but something happens when you turn 18 and you go off to college or you graduate from college and you just kind of disappear. So that's why, to me, the young adults are very important. And I also have a colleague who focuses on the transition clinic and actually on the OB side of type 1 diabetes. She did extra training to be able to be in the OB clinic to work with the young women when they're pregnant also.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And you're absolutely right. Once you turn 18, it's like, okay, what's next? I can definitely relate because I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 17 years old, and it was 3 months before graduating from high school. So at that point, I was, I was dealing with a lot of emotions when it came to figuring out how to manage diabetes and how I was going to transition into college. And so I think you're absolutely right. And like fast forward to today, I am very proud to say I successfully graduated college.
Yeah.
I did it all with type 1 diabetes, so it's definitely possible. But I am thinking today's conversation will be very insightful, and hopefully we can provide some great advice for anybody who's transitioning to college or planning to live on by themselves for the first time.
Now,
Um,
did you go away to college or did you stay in your hometown?
This is a lovely question because, like I said, I was 3 months from graduating.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, I had planned to go to a college that was out of state. But because of my diagnosis, my doctors were like, Tiana, you should probably stay close, so you can adjust everything. Your doctors are here, your parents are here. And so I ended up going to a university about 30 minutes from my house. It's a pretty large university, not very well known just yet. I don't know if you know Rob Howe. He actually went to the same college as me.
Yeah.
But I ended up doing that, and I just commuted from college and my house, So it was the typical campus life and dorm life experience, but it was still amazing, and I had tons of fun.
But see, that's a great example of one of the things that I want us to change over time. I don't want your diabetes to limit you in any way. If you want to go to MIT, if you want to go to Berkeley, you should go. Unfortunately, not all universities give the access that we're able to do to the students with type 1. I can tell you every summer we have at least one family where they come for orientation before classes start and they contact our clinic and we make an appointment to see the student and the parents at that time. So then when the parents send the kid off to school, they know that there's a doctor there who knows their child. And
Right.
yeah, I'm not in the dorms, but I'm available to them and I want to help. And I want people to be able to go to whatever college that they need to. I
Mhm.
understand the perspective of pediatric endocrine. They want to kind of guide you through the first part. They try to keep people through college because they feel they know them. And quite often, as I said it, once they're at college, they don't have good access to endocrine care.
Right.
But there's also a balance in there that you're now an adult, you're on your own, you need to start transitioning to adult care. And so it's kind of frustrating to us to see pediatric endocrine treating them like children, dosing them like children, adjusting them like children when we're treating them like adults. But
Right.
anyway, sorry to get started on
No,
that.
no, no,
I'm
no.
glad you mentioned that because I know it's a hard transition period, but so is going to college, and you need to be able to do what you want to do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I know it's probably super comforting for parents to be able to meet with you guys with their child before sending them off. I know that would have been very helpful for my parents and hopefully like reassured them a little bit that I would have been okay. But that wasn't the information they were provided. So, and like on this topic, for people living with type 1 diabetes, college is oftentimes their first time that they're like on their own. So, what are some of the main things to keep in mind for those individuals?
So I have a couple ideas and then a question for you.
Mhm.
I think the first thing I would say is we have to give the incoming college student the confidence that they can do this, that they do know how to do this, even though they're doing it on their own. It helps if they get a chance to start transitioning a couple years before, if they're in a system that has a transition clinic that just starts teaching them because they don't know about insurance. They don't know how to order insulin. They don't know what to do if they break their last bottle of insulin. These are things that we have to kind of prepare them for. But the other one is just to make them realize that they can do it and to believe in themselves. And my question for you was going to be, what was one thing you wish someone had told you when you started college? Something to help boost your belief that you could do it.
Great question. I honestly did not know that they made accommodations for people with type 1 diabetes until probably a few months ago, to be honest with you. And I wish I would have known that because I was taking tests and like going through classes with super high blood sugars, and I had no idea that there was an off, like I could have basically skipped out on that until I felt better. And so, I wish I would have known that. And then I didn't really know anybody that was in college at the time. I mainly met a bunch of kids that had diabetes as well. So it would have been nice to have someone a little older that had been through it before, or even a little more guidance on like the adult side, because they actually kept me in pediatrics for an entire another year. So after I turned 18, I was still in the pediatric side. And yeah.
So I learned about the accommodations from College Diabetes Network. And so to me, one of the first things I ask anybody going to college is, have you registered with the disability services? And I explain to them it doesn't mean you're disabled, you're not on a list or anything, but it does provide you that opportunity that if your pump malfunctions, you wake up with a high sugar, you have a test, legally the professor cannot make you take the test that day. But there's other little things too, and sometimes I've had to write letters. But for example, just having a refrigerator in your dorm room, being allowed to have a mini fridge so you can keep some extra snacks in there. Not all dorm rooms have fridges or suites, and they don't allow them. But if we write a letter, then they're allowed to have it. And so that's part of the planning. And I'm very big on planning and information. And I think if you plan for all possibilities, then they're not going to happen. But if
Right.
you don't plan, then crazy stuff happens. I really think the College Diabetes Network is very valuable because it gives you information to review before you go to college.
Mhm.
And if your school has a chapter, now you've got a support system. You've got people to talk to, people to help you. And in
Right.
fact, one of our students is actually creating a mentoring program so that anybody newly diagnosed, for example, in college, is going to be matched up to someone with experience to help them. And that's one of her college projects.
I love that so much. How cool.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to like update me on that because I feel like that's going to be such a big deal. Like you mentioned, you should probably definitely, tell your college about your condition ahead of time. And like, what are the accommodations that you can expect? I know you mentioned like having, your fridge in your dorm room, snacks. Are there anything else that we should be aware of?
So some of them actually let you register first. Like you get to register when the athletes do, so you get to pick your classes so that you have a schedule that is more amenable to your diabetes.
I can't believe I didn't know this.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't believe I didn't know this. Okay. Well, if I ever attend college again, I will definitely be registering for classes before everybody else.
But
um,
there's other interesting information about the college. Again, things I've learned. I would encourage people go on the CDN website, look at the preparing for college, and also now they have materials for after you graduate, preparing to graduate and go out into the world. But just some other things, just I've learned from the students is, I'm always encouraging them to have apps to look up nutrition on new foods, new restaurant. Use the Calorie King, and you can just type in Panera, and the whole menu comes up. Our dining halls have all the nutrition information on their website. But as the head of our nutrition said, that's the recipe. The food is actually made by college work study students, so it's not going to be perfect. The carb count is not going to be exactly the same every time. And I thought that was an interesting perspective on it. I will tell you one tip I learned from my students is they would snag the little packets of honey from the dining hall. Yeah, so they always had some glucose source with them. But what they did tell me was when you do that, make sure you put it in a Ziploc bag. Don't just throw it in your backpack because your books are going to smash the packet of honey and then you're going to have honey all over your books.
I've had so many experiences like that, or I will put some Smarties in my backpack, and then when I go to eat them, they're just like thousands of Smarties just on the floor of my bag, like crushed. So, such good advice. Make sure you have a bag
Yep,
for
yep.
your honey. And what other resources are available on campus for people with type 1?
Well, those are the big ones that I know of. Obviously, there's student health services, and you can always go into student health services and get care. The other thing, too, is our student health services has access to psychology, counseling, and psychiatry. So, just in terms of coping, I would encourage people don't be afraid to go into student health and ask for help. Ask to speak to a mental health professional. It doesn't mean that you have a problem, it just means you need some counseling to develop adult coping mechanisms to handle some of these problems.
Right. That's a big one. I think a lot of us sometimes do get a little, you know, you don't want to be that person that's like stigmatized because you're asking for help. And I think it's important that when we know that we need it, we make sure that we ask for it. So that's
Exactly.
a great point. And should you live with a roommate? And like, how do you explain your diabetes to your roommate?
So, Dr. Gabby, who's the former CEO of our medical school, who just recently got his 50-year type 1 Dazzling medal. So he was diagnosed when he was a medical student, and as an obstetrician surgeon, he has had type 1 all these years. He feels very strongly that everybody should have a roommate. It's not even just, let me think how to say it. Even though we now have really good continuous glucose monitoring and someone else can be monitoring you, you can share to them, to have that person in the room who maybe hears you making funny noise in the middle of the night, happens to wake up and see you over there sweating, he has a really valid point, because if you're having a severe hypoglycemic episode, how long is it going to take someone to come down the hall or come from the other end of the dorm? And is your door locked? Are they going to be able to get in? Whereas having someone in the room to help you can be very valuable. And so I
Absolutely.
think he makes a really good point, even with the introduction of all our wonderful technology.
Yeah, great point. I actually have a friend who went to CSU and was in her dorm room one night. For whatever reason, she didn't hear her alarm go off, and she was actually having a seizure. Like her blood sugar was that low, and her roommate noticed and was able to like inject her with her glucagon and call 911, and so essentially like helped her during that time. So yeah, great advice.
And we're actually, to try to make it a little bit easier for the roommate, we're encouraging people to get the nasal glucagon instead of the injectable kit now. Just because, I mean, if you're 18 years old, you're probably kind of scared to inject your roommate. But, you know, how do you explain it to your roommate? And I've asked people, and I don't know the best way. I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, it would be you need to tell your roommate you're still a normal person. You just have to take insulin when you eat.
Right.
But otherwise, you're the same as everybody else.
Right.
And, you know, the challenge is, does the roommate know anything about diabetes? And you want to ease them into it so they're comfortable and they're not fearful of it.
Yeah, I think too, most kids and people that are our age are like so open to learning and helping out. I've never met someone that was like, no, like don't talk to me about that. You know, everyone's like, yeah, like tell me more. How can I help if this happens? So I agree. If you can have those conversations and just explain it to them, I think everything else from there on should be a pretty smooth ride.
And I also think if you do have a continuous glucose monitor, I think that your roommate is someone that you should share with. If nothing else, so you have two alarms going off, and hopefully you'll hear both of them if you don't hear one.
Right.
The other thing I've always thought about, and it's kind of a personal thing, it makes sense for the RA assigned to your floor to be someone that you share to. But sometimes maybe the resident assistant doesn't want that responsibility, or maybe you don't like the person and you don't trust them, so you don't want to share to them. But that is a good backup person to be able to share to. And
Absolutely.
the other question is just if you have other friends either on your floor or in your dorm. Because remember, you want people who are close by that you're sharing with.
Mhm.
Then there's always the issue of your parents. On the one hand, if you are over the age of 18, you're not legally obligated to share with your parents, right? But you might feel morally obligated, and your parents might be less likely to call you and bother you if they're able to look at it.
Right.
I would say, though, it's a good idea to have a very open discussion with your parents and you both set parameters and limits on what is done with that information from your continuous glucose monitor when you go off to school.
That was my next question for you. And I was gonna say, like, how much should you keep in contact with your parents? And I do think it's like a case by case because I know for me, I was just diagnosed, and so it was almost like my level of responsibility and independence, like it was like withdrawn. My parents were like, okay, yeah, let me know exactly where you're at, where you're going at all times. And it was just, they were more, you know, in control of what I was doing um, than they had been in like the past like couple of years. And so once I got to college and like there were times when I just wanted to hang out with my friends and I had my CGM on and my mom would call me all throughout the day and the night and be like, you're beeping, like, you know, your blood sugar's low. And I'm like looking at my phone, like I'm like, Mom, I already know that. And she was just like kind of overbearing.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to take you off of my Dexcom and put somebody else on my Dexcom. Because I honestly don't like to worry her either. And
Yeah.
so I decided to put like my brother and a few of my friends on my Dexcom, and they were just a little more like, you know, respectful of my space. And I know my mom cares about me, but I do think it's like case by case. Some people really would prefer to have their parents, you know, connected to them and keep in contact at all times. So,
And that's what I think part of it is you have to have an open discussion. What are the parameters? What are the limits? For example, if you're using the Dexcom, not everybody realizes that the person you share to doesn't have to have the same alerts and alarms as you do. And
mhm.
anybody that I'm following, I really only have the urgent low alert on. I don't have their rise, their fall, their high, their low, because I'm only following them just to find out if something really happens.
Right.
So that's another thing is to make a deal with the mom of, you know, okay, if I'm having an urgent low, yes, you can call me. But if I'm drifting down low, give me time, let me come out of it on my own. You know, you just and you have to it's very hard as a child to speak up to your parent, but this is part of getting a chance to go out on your own is to teach them to trust you. You have to give me the space to handle it for myself. You have to trust me that I'm going to. And I'm sharing with you so that you don't call me all the time. Because think about before we had CGM, where our parents could follow, and whether it is the Dexcom and their Share app or some other app that is allowing them to follow a different technology. And I know there's some homegrown apps that are actually really nice for people to share from. The key is for the parent to realize, look at, I have this window I can watch, so I don't have to be panicking, wondering what's going on. I have the information, but I have to sit back and trust that I've given them the tools to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, is to push your parents back, but still allow them in.
Where were you when I was going through college? This is just great advice. I would have had more conversations with my parents, and probably could have resolved things a little better had I talked to you a few years ago.
But also sometimes we have to be part of the conversation because the child doesn't know how to do it. And also that's an important piece is, as an adult endocrinologist, I don't see very many under the age of 18. My colleague does. She starts seeing them at 16 in the children's clinic. But when you come to me at 18, my visit is with you. I'm going to ask the parents to wait in the waiting room. We may bring the parents back in, and this is the kind of thing that we can raise and then plan for how we're going to have the conversation with the parents.
Right.
So, it's hard. It's hard in that age group to learn how to do this for yourself, and we're pushing you to learn. But at some point, you have to learn.
Absolutely. And like you kind of mentioned a little bit about this, but for parents, how can you feel safe knowing that you're sending your type 1 off or away from home for the very first time? Like, what advice would you give to them?
I don't know that there's any easy way to convince a parent that it's safe for their child to leave them. And even though they've had 18 years, they're still not ready and they want to do everything for them. But an ideal thing is if you've had an opportunity to start to transition them into being an adult. And that's what I would say is spend that senior year of high school trying to find a way to prepare them to do it, to prepare them to be able to do it for themselves. What are the things that you think they need to know how to do for themselves, that they need to be prepared? You have to step back and not smother them, even though you want to. You want to do everything for them. You want to take care of everything, make sure they have everything they need, but you can't. And that's one of the hardest things as a parent, is figuring out how to step back and let them do it. Now, you can help them by having them prepared for any possibility. Help them figure out how to get that fridge in their dorm. Help to make sure that they have the ability to have snacks there and that they can get those snacks. To make sure that they have their glucagon there, all those kind of things. And that's all you can do.
Yeah. And just make sure they're independent and can manage it on their own before actually sending them out on their own. Um, and
And you know what? No matter how much the parent says it and I say it, that you really got to dose your insulin, depending on the insulin, 5 to 15 minutes before your meal. I'll just remind them to take their insulin before their meal, not after.
such a good reminder. I still to this day need that reminder because sometimes I forget. I'm like, oh, I need to go take insulin.
It's getting easier with the newer insulins. They're at least faster onset, so that
Right.
helps a lot. It really, really does. Um, I was trying to think of what else I thought about the parents. Oh, the other thing I thought, because I was just thinking parents in general, is keep the communication open.
Mhm.
This is one of the biggest challenges here is the child may get mad, you don't understand. I'm 18, I can do it myself. Keep that bridge open. Don't burn those bridges. Even if you're getting frustrated with their mistakes, with their screw up, try to help them through it. Stay positive. So many people growing up, their diabetes was negative. They were always in trouble. They got yelled at in clinic because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Now your child's going off and trying to do it for themselves. And all their screw ups, try to turn it into a positive, into a learning experience so that, they're moving forward.
Yeah, That's such good advice. I know, it's sometimes it's hard when diabetes, sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it has its ups and its downs, of course. And so just having that positivity, it just makes the world a difference. My mom, whenever I'm like crying and upset, I know she cares so much, and I'll just go to her and I'll just vent and I'll cry, and then she's like, "You got it, like you're so strong," and then I'm good. So that support system is so crucial, I think, for anyone that has type 1. You're right. And I know we talked about CGMs a bit. And do you think that, CGMs are a good idea? I know you said that CGMs do make it easier, but it's still good to have like roommates and things of that nature. But um, additionally on that end, who would you share your Dexcom with? Like who should we be sharing it
I think the other thing, because we've raised the issue of roommates, friends, the significant other, the person you're dating, think twice before you share with someone you're dating. Maybe kind of have an amount of time you've been dating before you consider sharing the Dexcom, which of course brings the other issue of when do you tell someone you're dating that you have diabetes? Some people are very open and it's a topic of conversation on the first date.
with?
More, that's you.
Yeah,
A
I'm
lot
like,
of people wait a couple dates before, let's see if I'm going to tell this guy anything about me. We've got some great stories of people who were so scared to tell the person, and turned out the other person had type 1 and had an insulin pump also.
are you serious?
Hmm.
That would be so nuts. If you were like, oh, I have diabetes, and like, oh my goodness, me too. I don't
Yeah.
know what I would say.
And one of my young ladies was getting pretty serious dating this person, and she's decided to teach him how to check finger stick glucoses. And they checked his glucose, and it was like 500. And it turned out he was about to convert into type 1 diabetes and go into DKA. So she put her continuous glucose monitor on him and called me to get him an appointment as fast as possible. So, I
This is
mean, there's just crazy
good
stuff like
episode.
that.
Okay.
But I think it makes it easier to go to college with a continuous glucose monitor, because what the continuous glucose monitor does, it's more than just a wearable meter. It's not just that you're wearing your meter. You don't have to poke your finger. You don't have to poke your finger in public and dispose of the equipment, but you know where your sugar's been and where it's going. If you're running to class and you sit down and all of a sudden it warns you you're going low, you can prevent going low in that 2 hour class,
Mhm.
or going high. It gives you a chance to know where you've been. If you forgot to dose for your meal, which college students so often do, then it reminds you and at least gives you a chance to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I think for college, I think it's really, really important. Also, because your schedule is different, every semester your schedule changes. Now you have to adapt to a new schedule, getting up at different times, different days, and that CGM is there to help you adjust to the new schedule. So I can't imagine going to college without one now.
I know. I know. I think too, now that we have CGMs, when you talk about needing those accommodations, it does make things a bit easier because let's say my blood sugar was going low before taking a test, I could prevent that, meaning that I would then be able to stay in class and take the test versus having to take it at some other time.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. There,
So you,
the type 1 or the Beyond Type 1 team say this all the time, but like there's no better time than to have diabetes than like right now.
yeah. An interesting thing that came up with one of our college students is this student's going to be taking a standardized test. I forget if it's like MCAT, LSAT, whatever, and was wondering if you request accommodations, does that flag your score or your test as someone who potentially, had this assistance? And so one of our people checked, and it turns out the results don't indicate that you had accommodations. So
Good.
it's like those are two separate parts of your file. So the schools you're applying to who get your test scores don't know that you had requested accommodations for your diabetes to take that standardized test. And that's a concern a lot of students have.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and that's really reassuring to know that they don't
Yeah.
look at that. It doesn't impact you. And so on the topic of like diets and things of that nature, like how do you deal with various changes in your diet and when you're in college and alcohol as well?
You know, I mean, it'd be easy to say just keep eating the foods that you ate when you were at home, but it doesn't happen that way when you go off to college. I think, like everything else with food, part of it is just information. You know, learning the carb content of the foods that you're going to eat. You can't be looking them up every time, but you can add more and more foods to your repertoire and just get to know the carb content of those foods. The In terms of socializing and alcohol, again, just plan ahead because you don't want to be in a social situation having to look up your carbs. You want to be able to eat the different foods that are offered there. With alcohol, my primary concern is that someone eat before they go out because the alcohol is going to lower your sugar. Okay, depending on what you're drinking, if you're mixing it with sugared soda, obviously it's going to go up. But, you know, if you're doing shots of tequila, that's going to lower your sugar. So as long as you eat beforehand, you're probably not going to get in trouble from your shots of tequila. And then when you get to beer and wine, people have very individual responses. Some of our male students say they can drink 5 Bud Lights with no effect on their sugar, but 3 microbrews affect their sugar. And then red and white wine are different. I have had times where I've raised this with the parents there, and the mom says, okay, we're buying some wine on the way home because we're going to spend the next week before you go to college learning how you respond to red and white wine. So I think it's important to test it out in a controlled setting and learn your response so that when you do get into that social setting, you're prepared for it. But if in doubt of what you're going to drink, please eat first. That's going to minimize your risk of hypoglycemia.
Okay, so I have like one or two more questions for you before we head off today. And I want to know, obviously we're living through a pandemic right now. I'm not sure how many pandemics you've lived through, but for kids on campus during COVID, are there any things they should take into consideration?
You know, we refer to it as universal precautions, which is being careful in every situation, no matter what. Wear your mask. And if you're in a room with a bunch of people, keep your mask on. I think the best example of that is what happened to the Denver Broncos, where the 4 quarterbacks met to watch film and they didn't keep their masks on. And sure enough, now Denver had no quarterbacks to play their game last week.
I know. I'm
And so,
from Colorado, so that was like, I live in Colorado. The Broncos didn't have a quarterback. Their wide receiver had to play, and I love sports. But I was like laughing so hard that that even happened.
all 4 quarterbacks, they went and watched film with no mask on, thinking that they're safe, you know, but nobody's safe. You know, the key is you're wearing the mask both to protect yourself from other people and to protect people from you. So just please wear your mask all the time and please pull it up so that it covers your nose. And the one thing I would say about that, let me grab one of my masks. This is what makes me crazy. When you get your mask, take it and fold the metal all the way like this, and then put it on your nose, let it form to your nose. Because otherwise, it's falling off your nose. But if you bend that metal and then let it form to your nose, because you really need it up here on your nose. But the other thing I would say, you know, and use hand sanitizer more than you think you need to. But the other thing is, please get a flu shot. What I am so scared of is people with flu and COVID, and I don't even know what we're going to do when that happens.
Ooh, that scares
Yeah.
me to think about. And thank you for the demonstration on how to wear a mask because definitely necessary.
Yeah, because so many people, it's like sitting here on their nose because they don't know how to keep it up. It's great if you have glasses because your glasses can hold it up. But the other thing is everybody's walking around with it beneath their nose like this. Well, you're not doing any good. It's got to be up here. And
Right.
the other thing is they take it and they don't open it. And then they're pulling it and pulling it down their chin, which is why it's under their nose. You know, open it all the way up bend the nose part and get it up here on your nose so it stays up.
Right. So wear a mask, make sure it's over your nose, open it up. You fix the little part up here so it's on properly. And
Yeah,
then
bend the metal.
bend the metal.
Bend the metal. And keep
And
it
then
on.
sanitize those hands.
Yeah, and the thing is you got to realize is people may not know they're positive, but they are and they're spreading it. And young children carry it without knowing it. So all these people, oh, it's just a young child, I'm safe. Well, no, that young child might have it too.
Okay, so my very last question for you. I wish we could talk all day. We probably could if we had time. But is there anything else I haven't asked that you want people to know or that they should know?
I don't think there's anything you haven't asked, but I think it's important for people to realize that diabetes is something you have. It's not what you are. It doesn't have to limit you. You can do anything you want. You can go anywhere. You can be anything. And if you just look in recent years, I mean, you can be a pitcher who wins the World Series. You can be the prime minister of a major country. You can be a normal, everyday person who takes care of the people in his community. You can be a normal person who works a 9 to 5 job and, has kids and plays soccer. And I mean, you can do anything. You don't let it limit you. Don't let it stop you from doing whatever you want to do with your life.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Such great advice. And you have such a pure, genuine soul that I know anyone who's your patient or comes in contact with you is so lucky, just to know you. So thank you for being here today and just sharing all of this wonderful information that you've learned over the years with us. This was a wonderful discussion, and we hope that everyone who listened enjoyed themselves and was able to take something from our conversation today. And huge thank you to Dexcom for making this all possible. And, we look forward to seeing everyone on our next series, Knowledge Drop series episode. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Yay, I enjoyed it too. We'll have to keep in touch.
Yep.